Hello students, this is Mr. Zamaripa, and today we're going to learn about the differences between plant and animal cells. We're also going to learn about the difference between plant and animal organelles, as well as the similarities. So we're going to kind of go over that right now. So first of all, I just want you to take a look at the general shape of the animal and the plant cell. Animal cells are typically round or roundish. Here's a picture of a real animal cell. You can see it's not necessarily a circle, but it is roundish. And plant cells are typically squarish. They may look like a rectangle. They may look like a hexagon. There's going to be a lot of straight lines in a plant cell. Here's a real picture of a plant cell right over here. All right, so that's one difference. Now another difference is you're going to see many different color of cells for animal cells. And that's simply because scientists sometimes will add dye to their slides so that you can see them, the cells better. However, in a plant cell, they are typically green and don't really need dye to be seen. And you can thank this little guy right here, chlorophyll, for all the greenness that you see inside a plant. So we'll talk more about chlorophyll in a little bit. But typically, plant cells are going to be green. So we know that animal cells are round or irregular. Plant cells are kind of square or boxy or like a rectangle. Animal cells can be any color. Plant cells are usually green. So let's now talk about the membrane. You've probably noticed SpongeBob and SpongeBob SquarePants and Patrick blowing these bubbles here. The skin that surrounds the bubble reminds me of the cell membrane. So the skin that goes around the animal cell is the cell membrane. And I'm going to bring an arrow over here so that you can see that. All right, and then on your version of this activity, you're going to be copying basically everything you see on this page, and you're going to be adding the arrows. When you forget which ones, you'll be coming back to the video to remind yourself where they are. All right, so that's our first one. Now, our plant membrane is not on the outside where you might expect it to be, but it's actually the next line. So this is called the cell wall. We'll get that to in a second. But the next one is the cell membrane. And we're going to talk about how you can tell the difference. Grab another arrow here. And we need to bend that arrow down to where it needs to be at. Oops. Be right there. And not the first wall, but the second boundary that you see. The cell membrane is going to contain all the organelles. So in this one, the cell membrane is containing all the organelles in the animal cell, and then in the plant cell, the cell membrane is containing all the organelles. All right, really good so far. Next, let's talk about cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is simply all the jelly or gel that's inside the cell that holds all these organelles and suspend them up where they're at. So instead of laying down on the ground, all these organelles are kind of just floating around. And both animal cells and plant cells have this gel. Now I like to use hand sanitizer as an analogy of what it might look like, but you could also choose Jello or jelly, anything that would suspend the organelles together. So I'm going to go ahead and bring an arrow. Oop. Arrow coming. point this arrow in this area right here where it's not pointing exactly anything, just pointing at the clear liquid that is inside the cell, the clear jelly that's inside the cell. Now your plant cells also going to have the same thing. So we're going to take that and bend that arrow down. And we want to bend it down into this clear area right here, because that's where your jelly is found. In this case, I'm using the analogy of hand sanitizer. All right, so far we've noticed a couple things. Animal cells and plant cells both have cell membranes. Animal cells is in a different location than the plant cells, and both of them have cytoplasm. All right, our next word that we're going to go over is the nucleus. So let's talk about the nucleus. Okay, so on the animal cell, I use a symbol, the nuclear symbol that's in the background there, to help you kind of get started with the word, you know, nuclear, nucleus. Okay, and there's a picture of a brain inside, because that is its function. So I want you to guess about what that function is till I tell you. I'm going to go ahead and move our pointers from the nucleus vocabulary word, and we are going to point it to the nucleus. And I think right here would be a good place to point to. All right, so the whole round-like structure, either in the middle of the cell or sometimes even located on the side of the cell, is going to be our nucleus. Can anybody guess why I have chosen to have a brain as the symbol for our nucleus? What do you think the job of the nucleus is? All right. If you said or are thinking maybe it's because it controls everything, like your brain controls everything, then you are correct. All right, so there we go. It's pointing to the nucleus. There we go. Oops. All right. Which brings us to our next organelle. Our next organelle is mitochondria. Mitochondria is kind of like the power plant of the cell, makes the electricity, the power to run animals and run plants. And by that, I actually mean energy. So the ability to get up in the morning and talk and move and go about your normal day. That's all because of energy being created by your mitochondria. Plants also need the energy of their mitochondria to grow, to make fruit, to make flowers. They need energy for that. And so all this happens in the mitochondria. And I am going to show you where they're located at here. And we're going to start with the animal cells mitochondria. And we're talking about this guy. Which one? Which one do you think produces electricity? Tell me where to go. All right, if you guess this one, you guessed correctly. This is the mitochondria. Now, animal cells have mitochondria, and so do plant cells have mitochondria. See if you can tell what the difference is between the mitochondria of a plant cell and the mitochondria of a animal cell. Well, I get our next arrow over here to point at the mitochondria in our plant cells. So it's going to be right here where you see the little electric bolts coming out of the mitochondria. I once saw a electron microscope of mitochondria. Ooh. There we go. And I could actually see lightning bolts coming out of the mitochondria. So it really does not exaggerating there with those those little lightning bolts. You do see those in real mitochondria. And if you notice the difference between the animal cell mitochondria and plant cell mitochondria, you probably picked up that there are a lot more mitochondria in animal cells than there are in plant cells. And the reason for this is plants have a different way of getting energy, and that second way is through sunlight. And we're going to talk about that much later this week when we start talking about photosynthesis and how they can create sugars so they can use to create energy through their mitochondria. All right, so we'll talk more about that later, but notice that plant cells have less mitochondria. All right, so we are now on vacuoles. So a vacuole is a place in the cell. Let's start up here with animal cells. There's a place in the cell that can hold water. Do you guys see anything there that can hold water? It can hold food. It can hold waste. So it holds all those three things like I'm telling you. Do you think that it holds it all in the same container? No, that would be gross. So it is possible for animal cells and plant cells to have more than one vacuole depending on what they're storing at that specific time. So they need to store water, food, and waste. You're probably going to find 3 vacuoles inside your cells. But all it needs to store is water for that period of time, then there will only be 1. So they kind of just pop up whenever they're needed. So they can hold food, water, or waste. I like to use the analogy of a water tank to represent holding water. And one of the things you'll notice about the plant cell vacuole and the animal cell vacuole is what? You notice the difference between these vacuole sizes? All right, if you said vacuole cells in plants are larger, that's exactly what I want you to look at. Plant cells are going to have larger. They're going to have larger vacuoles because they need to hold more water. And the reason they need to hold more water is going to be very closely related to this next word, the cell wall. The reason the vacuoles hold more water in plant cells and need to have bigger vacuoles is because plants do not have skeletons. And animals have skeletons so they can stand up. So we have in our bodies skeletons that allow us to stand up straight. Plants cannot stand up straight unless they pump water from their vacuoles in between this membrane and this wall right here. So you see all this water that's in between the membrane, the cell membrane, and this is called the cell wall. We're going to label it in a second. We're talking about this water here. It's highly pressurized. It's really pushed in here so much that it kind of just makes the plant stand up. And that's why plants are standing up. Now, if you don't water a plant, if you want to try this experiment at home, don't water a plant until you start seeing it kind of droop down. We call that wilting. And that's okay. It's not dead. If you give it some water, it will actually put water in the vacuole, pump it in between the cell wall and the membrane, and it will stand right back up. And again, plants do that because they do not have skeleton systems to help them stand, so they need the support of the vacuole water, the cell membrane, and also the cell wall. So let's go ahead and label the cell wall. You're going to note that there is no cell wall in the animal cell. So now we have our first major difference. Look up at the animal cell and see if you see a cell wall. They don't need it. And does anybody remember why they don't need it? And if you said because animals have skeletons, you're correct. Plants do not have skeletons to stand up, so we're going to need that cell wall. Cell wall is a lot thicker, also protects the cell, double protects the cell. Uh, so it also serves as a protection as well as holding the water. All right, so far so good. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. We're now going to talk about, let me see, we talk about all these: membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus, mitochondria, and the vacuole in the animal cell. And in the plant cell, it looks like we're starting to talk about the things that are only in the plant cell, like the cell wall. Chloroplast, also an organelle that's only in the plant cell. Okay, I'm going to show you what it looks like, and then you can tell me if you can find any in the animal cell. So let's start by bringing an arrow over here to the chloroplast. All right, can you all see them? They look like little jelly beans. Okay, these is kind of like a cut view. If it was not cut, you wouldn't see what's inside it. So I want you to see what's inside them. This has been sliced in half so you can see what's inside them. They kind of look like a green jelly bean, and inside of them look like tiny little green quarters stacked up on each other. So these little things that you see in the middle, those are called chlorophyll, and the chloroplasts are just the pill, the green pill looking objects. Now you're going to notice there's probably going to be more chloroplasts in an animal cell than there are any other organelles. And again, this is because they rely on these chloroplasts to produce energy for the cell. These chloroplasts produce sugar or glucose, and this sugar or glucose is used to power up the mitochondria. So there's a question in the test that always asks, what do chloroplasts produce? And they produce, what is this called? If you said sugar, you're right. You get 10 more points if you know the science word for sugar, and that is glucose. So it produces glucose. You probably will see the word glucose in the test. You probably will not see the word sugar on the test. All right, and last but not least are the chloroplasts. The chlorophyll, excuse me. And the chlorophyll are going to be the tiny little stacks of quarters that are inside of the chloroplast. So I'm going to try to get the little arrow going there. See if I can do that without messing up the arrow. Okay, we're going to point it right there. And move this way. There we go. Move this away from that one. Okay, like it. All right, so the chlorophyll are the little quarters that you see stacked inside the chloroplast. Now, this is what makes the plant cell green. The chlorophyll produce the pigment that turn plant cells green. All right, so let's rehash about this chloroplast. Chloroplasts produce the chemical called sugar. Okay, what for? For later on, we're going to use it to make energy. And chlorophyll produce the pigment that make the plant green. Now, did anybody find any of those in an animal cell? In our example of our animal cell? No. And if you did, that animal would be very easy to identify because that animal would be green looking, like a green looking animal. Its skin would be green because of all the chloroplast and the chlorophyll. I don't know an animal like that. If you do, make sure you send me an email and let me know so I can take a look at it. But chlorophyll is the pigment that allows the plant to look green. All right, well, that's all I have for you. Hope you enjoyed your lesson on the differences between plant and animal cells and the difference between their organelles, some of the differences, some of the similarities, and wishing you the best on the next activities. You're going to need to remember these very well. If you are having trouble with these, make sure you go over them. They will be asked again on the test later on. All right, well, this is Mr. Z saying over and out. See you in the next lesson.